Hi, thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to be making winter natural wreaths out of greenery and conifers and things that you can find outdoors, maybe in your yard or at the park. So today we are going to be working with lots of natural materials and just a few other materials. So today's project is going to be nice and easy, and at the very end you're going to see a full finished project as we finish and complete this wreath we've got here, and we'll go step by step with the supplies, materials, and the steps needed in order to complete your wreath. So first and foremost, let's talk about supplies that you're going to need. Supplies should include greenery, and we'll go back to greenery and talk more specific about that. You're also going to need some other tools, such as a 22 gauge wire. This is a floral wire. You can pick these up at a lot of decoration centers, those types of things. You need wire cutters, preferably not scissors from home because that's going to tear those up, but wire cutters intended for those, for cutting metal. I've got some pruning shears here. These are super handy, especially with working with some of these smaller items. I'll let you know that some of these, they're not all made equal. Some of these are sharper than others. So you're going to want some pruning shears. Additionally, you're going to want your actually rim. So we call this the wreath form. So you can see part of the wreath form right here. Today I'm working with a size 18-inch. However, they do make larger and smaller sizes of that. I would recommend probably 18 on the smaller side as some of the smaller sizes you start with, or go larger, just because as we build onto that wreath, it has the tendency to kind of crowd the center of it a little bit, and you want to see that open circle in the wreath. So try to go 18 or larger on those wreath forms. Then today we're working with a variety of different greeneries. So some of these greeneries are going to include the American holly, and here's just a little piece of what that looks like. Reminds you a lot like Christmas, hopefully. I've also got a couple different types of cedar. So this one I actually found on the farm. It has some really nice berries that are naturally come out at this time of the year, around that late November, early December time. So really nice addition here. And they smell great. I've got another cedar here. There are tons of varieties of different cedars. Different varieties are going to give you different colors and textures. So something to keep in mind. There's no limitations. I'm discussing several greeneries today, but there's really no limitations to which greeneries you do or don't have to use. Ideally, pick some greeneries that are in the conifer family or the pines, and that means that they're going to stay hardy, they're going to stay green. These are all the leaves in the winter season. They're about the only things that are still left green, right? In the fall, everything else, the leaves have fallen off of those broadleaf trees. The conifers are the ones that are left, and the pines and things that are left with pretty green needles, and those are the ones that we're seeking to use today. So this is a pine, lots of different varieties as well. We won't get into the specifics, but lots of conifers, lots of pines, holly. Those are some great ones to consider. Some other things you might consider might be some man-made resources. You might have noticed that I had a really pretty pop of red. While my holly did have some bright red berries on it, it didn't necessarily pick up quite as bright as I would like. Is that really attention getter on that wreath? So I have included or picked up from a decoration store some authentic kind of berries that are man-made but make a really nice addition, and they were only about $2 a sprig. So not too bad to invest in, and you can reuse those over and over and over again. And then I thought it might be nice, we may or may not finish off with a bow. Consider some things like a bow, maybe like a letter, a large like initial for your last name. Some other things that you can get a little creative with and include. I've seen some other folks add pine cones. Those were all wet this morning, but lots of different ways. The more natural, the more elements of nature that you include, the better. So with that being said, we've talked about supplies, we've talked about our greenery. Let's get to talking about how to actually make today's wreath. So, like I said, as you all can tell, I have actually started half of the wreath here today. Wanted to go ahead and give you all an idea of what this was going to look like. And now you all are going to watch as I kind of build on to that with more steps to come. Making a wreath is not as complex as it sounds. First and foremost, you're going to gather your materials, your supplies. You're going to grab your greenery. You're going to want pretty good piles of these items. Most of your greenery pieces are going to end up being somewhere in that 9 to 12 inch in length. You can always trim it down, so it's better to start a little on the longer side of your twigs and be able to cut down to size. And you can kind of play around with that a little bit. Once you've gathered all those materials and supplies, your main dog in the fight is going to be the floral wire, and this is what ideally might be on a spool or might be on one of those cardstock centers to where it's going to flip easy. You're going to understand a little sooner before long why that's going to be so important for today's project. So starting off is pretty easy. Once again, this is a 22 gauge wire. Starting off, there's no right or wrong way to do this as long as it's secure. I'm going to start knowing that I'm going to start overlapping. So my next piece, I'm going to build on top of the end stems here, and I'm going to be going that direction. So just keep that in mind as you're wiring. So I'm going to kind of tilt this up for you all to see. I'm going to take one of these 4 bars that are crossed here, wrap it around kind of tight just to get it started. I just want to make sure it's nice and secure. This step doesn't necessarily have to be really pretty. You are basing it towards the end, the last couple of inches, maybe last 3 inches of a base of stalks. So if this was just a completely empty wreath form and we hadn't began there, you can just start wherever. You're going to wrap about 3 times and pull tight, and that's going to secure it. I'm going to keep placing my wire down. It's going to stay one continuous strand the whole time. I will say for today's purposes, to help myself out, I did actually pre-bundle some of these. So I've already cut these into pieces, bundled them in order that I wanted them to be, and then used a little piece of wire to secure them. That's an option if you would like to. Also, my supplies, you may want to consider very optional, but definitely very handy, a pair of gloves. I've got these nice ones from the extension office that will help save my hands from the cedar, which is pretty on the prickly side. So like I said, I've already bundled these. Ultimately, in the long run, these bundles are going to kind of get scrunched together. So you want to keep them somewhere. And this is a little on the long side, but you're aiming for pieces that are about 12 inches. I like mine to be kind of a spewed edge. It's not a really tight wreath. It's a little bit more of a open-faced wreath. So I really like a lot of bulk, but if you don't like it as bulky, then you definitely don't have to do it that way. So what I've done is I've just gone down. Before placing this next bundle, I'm going to go down a couple of inches. I want to highlight these berries, and it may take kind of maneuvering my greenery a little bit, but those pretty red berries that I've got there. Okay, so I brought my next bundle down some. And I'm going to, keeping it tight, you can notice I'm put some tension there. Wrap it about 3 times and let it settle. And that's how easy it was to secure a bundle, right? There was a little bit of work on the front end to actually prepare and layer those. So I'm going to talk through on my next bundle how I created this one. Okay, so I've got a smaller bundle here. I'm going to go with another one of my medium-sized bundles. How I layered my greenery today is I placed because the cedar is so dense. So this is the back side of my bundle. The cedar is a very dense, clustered leaflets, whereas the pine is really all over the place, right? So because it's not quite as dense, and I want that texture, and I want to be able to see that pine and not completely have it lost, I placed my personal choice. The cedar on the back, followed by the pine with the either of the cedars on the back, followed by the pine, and then finished up with the holly on top. It is a denser plant, but it's more smaller. So I have layered them that way, and this one's already pre-bundled. So again, I'm going to slide down just a little bit further. Okay. And I am going to run my wire diagonally across the back. Remember, keeping it tight is really, really important in this process. All right. That secured my next one. As you can see with these red berries I've got here, I'm going and I've got 4 sprigs of those total. So I have decided about every 4th of the wreath that I'm going to take one of these sprigs, take the long arm of the sprig. I just kind of bend it down. I don't need that much. And it also gives a little bit more to that wire to actually grasp on. So at this point in time, I've decided I'm going to actually go back in and add another sprig here, about my 4th of the way around my wreath. I'm going to place that piece right here. All right. Wrapping it 3 times around. The really nice thing about wreath making, and that's why your spool of wire is so nice, is that it stays continuous. So if you can simply not cut it time and time again, that will make this process that much easier. In the end, I'll end up getting these spaced out a little bit more, kind of placing my berries how I like them. But I love the pops of red that we've got here. I'm going to make one here for you as well. So just so you can actually see what this is going to look like. You know, I started with some of those pre-done ones, but I want to make sure you all can see what that process is going to look like, as it would look like if you were just bundling and placing straight on the wreath. So like I said, I'm going to take, I've got my 2 pieces of my different varieties of the cedar trees. This one's got the berries, so I like it layered on top of the second one. So I've got dents in the back. I've got my buried, pretty berries, they're blue, that are on this cedar. I'm going to follow up with a little bit of a sprig of pine, just because I love that texture that it creates. It's not a whole lot. We tried a lot of pine. I said, that's not quite right. So just figure out what works right for your arrangement, what kind of your preferred taste are, but I think this makes a nice bundle. You'll see as it adds on, it looks like there's a lot going on right here, but once you actually get to bundling these together, it tones down and it all just kind of starts flowing together. It just all starts flowing together, and it looks really pretty. I really like the really bulky wreath that has lots of, I may even go 4 times on this one because it's a bulky bundle. I refer to these as bundles. So each of these little pieces that I'm grouping together are referred to as bundles in wreath making. So last but not least, I've already pre-bundled my last little piece, knowing that I was going to, my last little piece, you know, I'm getting to the end, but I've got kind of unfinished space there, if you can tell right here where my thumb is. So it's not quite done. I could use some artificial things like a bow, and I may still finish up with one of those, but it's not as big of a space. So when you're finishing up, still pretty easy. You're still laying it over on top of that last one, but it's also going to require that you kind of lay it under the pieces of the very first one. Okay, so I am simply just kind of sneaking it on top of the previous one and underneath the edge of the first one, and that'll still leave me a little space to do some additional decorations like a bow if I would like. So I'm going to secure that here, and I had already pre-bundled that together. All right, now once I get to the end of my wire, like I said the whole time, we've never cut it unless you were pre-preparing those bundles, then I'm going to save myself, honestly, probably about 5 inches here at the end of my wire so that I can use that to tighten and tie up the end of the wreath. This time I want to take it around. And then on the back side, and this may be a little harder for viewers to see, but because I've got 4 bars that create the wreath form, just the shape of the wreath, and I can take my gloves off for this to make it a little bit easier. And so maybe viewers can see, but this one bar actually does a really nice job, in my opinion, rather than continuing around all 4 bars. It's just taking that one bar and securing it and looping it as many times as you'd like around that. And you can even go as far as taking your wire here and leaving yourself a little hanger loop. So that's what I'm gonna do here with the very end of my wire so that I've got something to hang on. Naturally, this wreath form already has some ribs on it, so that may already be something that you can hang to a door. You'll just need a door hanger at that point. We're almost done, but not quite yet. It's almost done, folks. I think it's looking really festive. I love these pops of red. I'm so glad that we kind of selected a little something else to help it out. At the very top, so I've kind of spaced my 4 sets of berries for the most part in quarters around the center of the wreath. I've got some space, and I knew at the end I'd probably have some space that maybe wasn't quite as full, and I thought this really festive bow would be the right way to just kind of finish it off. So what I'm going to do, this bow naturally came with some like zip ties on the very back. Love that. Makes it nice and easy. Otherwise, you could just take wire that you already have, and I'm just going to poke my zip ties through the frame like this. Now I'm gonna want to settle it. This one's really nice. It actually was pre-made. I'm not necessarily the best at making bows, but if you are, then more power to you. Definitely would love to see your bow tying capabilities if that's something that you are really talented with. But we're just gonna secure this, making sure that that bow faces out on the outside of that wreath, and secure it. Let's see how it looks like up against this black backdrop. Kind of tuck my bow down a little bit more. We've got these berry sprigs, might do some readjusting, but folks, this is practically an all natural wreath. We just collected some things from home or from our yards, or you know, a park or something like that. Maybe you've got some neighbors that might be generous and allow you to borrow some, so you have a variety of different winter greens, but essentially we've created this today with just a few things, major things being the wreath form, that 22 gauge wire cutters, pruners, so that you can cut the pieces shorter, and then we just wrapped it all together, finished it up with a pretty bow and some berries, and there you have it, folks. We have a gorgeous winter greenery wreath here that is ready, and that will stay nice and fresh for several weeks. And that's the really great thing about these winter greens, is that they're going to stay fresh and pretty and green. We hope that you enjoy today's video, and stay tuned for more winter activities